Today on The Frequency, we're still talking about the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and my special guest today did an incredible project for Ms. Magazine focusing on the women of hip hop. We're going to get into it right here on The Frequency. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Frequency. We are still counting down the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I'm your host, Dee Barnes. You know, hip hop is my thing. I love it. And I love especially focusing in on the women. So today, my special guest she included me in this project for Ms. Magazine, along with other women for the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So I want to bring on my special guest, Professor Janelle Hobson, who is the department chair and professor of women's gender sexuality studies at the University of Albany. Welcome, Professor.
Hello, Dee. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I've been really wanting to talk to you, get this moment with you. It's my turn now to ask you questions. Okay. Because when you approached me about doing, the article for Ms. Magazine, I was truly honored because during this time, 50th anniversary of hip hop, there's not enough focus on women. And I love that you came in, swooped in and, created this piece. So let's just get right into it. I want to talk about that first and then definitely go into your background and how you, got here. But my first question, though, when did you fall in love with hip hop?
Okay, well, I think I'm like many in my generation, we grew up with hip hop. I remember when Rapper's Delight came out. I also remember being able to watch music videos, both in terms of BET and MTV. And so I've always been there in high school. Actually, let me back up because obviously since junior high, I've been listening to the music in New York City, growing up in the Bronx. Of course, I think I have a kind of affiliation with hip hop just because like hip hop, I came from the Bronx, like hip hop. I lived on Cedric Avenue.
Wow.
You
did.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are my origins, just like hip hop. Obviously, I have moved beyond, since my early beginnings, but and have been able to travel the world, travel globally, like hip hop. So I definitely have that affinity for it. I remember in junior high with all my friends always listening to it, listening to some of those bootleg.
Right. The tape, the cassettes, definitely.
Absolutely. Or even being able to tune into some of those radio stations, especially, the forbidden stations where they were really playing the kind of uncut, raw, unedited version of real street music.
Right. Stuff that they didn't have on the mainstream. Like, mostly those were the college radio stations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And also remembering, so 7th grade, I had a memory of everybody was into Dougie Fresh's Slick Rick's, the show. And so when Salt and Pepper came out with the Showstopper, it's like as young women, we felt we had a moment.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then at Brooklyn Tech, I then, because I did go to high school at Brooklyn Tech, I remember being there when Spike Lee had posted flyers all over our high school, asking us to show up for the Public Enemy Fight the Power music video.
Oh my God, were you in that video? Were you in the crowd?
Not in that video. Oh. But I saw all my friends to work.
Okay, that's historic right there. Wow.
That is historic. So yeah, that's my upbringing. I've been in it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to talk about the Ms. Magazine product, but now you have me thinking about when did you know that you wanted to teach? Because I'm hearing about you and being in the community and going to events. When did you know you wanted to work with people and teach?
I think I've always had an a love affair with teaching. I've had people in my family, like I have aunts and cousins who are teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was never off limits for me. Even though my own mother is a nurse, it's interesting. We had, in terms of role models, especially for older Black women, those who were either nurses or those who were either teachers. And I found myself gravitating towards teaching. Of course, I was in high school, I really started writing and then developed a real interest in writing. And then I thought about going into journalism. But once I went to college and was majoring in English, I kind of moved away from journalism to focus more on writing and literature. And it was while I was doing that work as an English major that I started to think more and more about going into teaching. And I did teach high school for a year before I decided to go and work on my PhD. And I had a great undergraduate mentor who actually recommended me for a fairly new PhD program in women's studies at Emory University. So I applied and got into that. And that was how I kind of went right into women's studies as an academic career. And yes, and so during that time is when I was able to participate in a workshop that Ms. Magazine funded to try to recruit more of us who were doing the kind of feminist scholarship they were looking for, because they wanted to grow their own journalists, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, and so they thought, why not reach out to those who are already doing the work in terms of our scholarship? So that's how I started writing for Ms. So in a way, I think of it as a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it's like I get to combine my teaching and journalism once again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I left out in your intro is not only you, the professor, but you're a writer, also an author. We're going to talk about your books in a minute, but to focus back on the Ms. Magazine, I just got into this big debate with someone about the difference between feminism and womanism. And they also said that feminist was something for white women. And we had this huge debate about this. So can you break that down for the audience? Because I'm sure there's other people that think like that too.
Well, I think womanism had its moment. I'm actually thinking specifically of Alice Walker because she coined the term womanist. And around the time in the early 80s, she actually did a whole breakdown of what is a womanist. And, her first definition is a womanist is a Black feminist. So I really don't think that this really needs to be a debate because a womanist is just a Black feminist. And there's another definition she used that I thought was very playful. She says, womanism is the feminism as purple is the lavender. So you get the sense that womanism is supposed to be a deeper version of feminism. Right. But they're not supposed to be in conflict with each other. I do think, though, that I would say that because of more prominent Black feminists like Bell Hooks, for example, Guy Sheftall, they never shied away from calling themselves Black feminists.
Right.
Shaw, they've adopted the idea of being Black feminists, Patricia Hill Collins. So Black feminism really never fell out of favor, at least with a certain cohort, I would say. Those who are definitely within a more academic, intellectual background tend to claim feminism more than womanism, although there is a whole school of academic religious thought. So there are many Black feminist theologians who did reclaim Alice Walker's womanism. Right. So there's a whole womanist theology school of thought. So that's where I see womanism thriving, really, in that context.
The whole debate we got into is they were saying that feminism is, something that white women made up. And as if Black women couldn't, partake in that, or as if Black women weren't feminists themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another thing that I think that just shows, well, really, which is why I'm interested in journalism and mass media, because the reason why we even have that perception has everything to do with how media has framed those perceptions. Because if you know the history, you know that Black women have always been in feminism, or some version of feminism. The very first woman in America to speak out publicly on issues of women's rights was a Black woman, Mariah W. Stewart. Yes, it is our experiences specifically as enslaved women that also, I think, urge white women in particular who were interested in women's rights to actually think about women's rights through the lens of slavery.
Right.
As a matter of fact, though, the very first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, this year was a huge centennial about it.
Right.
And I think it's important to remember, to at least recognize that the reason why you had Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who decided to hold a whole Women's Rights Convention, had everything to do with the ways in which they wanted to participate in an actual world anti-slavery convention that was held in London back in 1840, 1841, something around that time. And those men were like, yeah, women, you have nothing to say. You can't speak, at our conference. And so as women, it's like, how are we, coming together, trying to advance the issue of abolitionism, and then we can't speak about it.
Right.
Yeah. And so, that's why we have a Women's Rights Convention in this country, because they were shut out from being able to talk about racial justice. And again, when you think of someone like Sojourner Truth, any of those other public Black women at the time, Frances E.W. Harper, or even the work of Harriet Tubman, what she's doing with the Underground Railroad, they were forcing the issue not just around racial justice, but around women's rights. All of them embrace both, feminism and racial justice. So we can't say that this is a white woman thing, because it's always been. Specifically, it's our experiences that have actually shaped the agenda of gender equality.
I'm so grateful for you breaking that down, because, the debate I got into was hot. And then I noticed, too, a lot of people think that way. So I'm so grateful that you broke that down. Well, you brought up Harriet Tubman. We've got to get into your project on that. But we still haven't talked about the, Ms. Magazine. So we're going to get into that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back.
All right.
Check this out. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are investing a record $7 billion into HBCUs. Billions for campus improvements, grants, and debt relief. Billions more for HBCUs. Endless possibilities for us.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Back right here on The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and my special guest, Professor Janelle Hobson. We're getting into feminism and Ms. Magazine and the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Please tell me how you put together this incredible article And I think we do have a shot of it, but just the fact that, you included me. Thank you so much. Not only just me, but the group that I was in, Body and Soul, which, hadn't really got any shine as much this, 50th anniversary of hip hop. So thank you. Tell me about it. Tell me about the article.
Okay, so just the article with you, or just the whole series?
No, the whole series.
Yeah.
Not just me. Not just me. No. Let's break it down.
Oh, absolutely. Well, in our last conversation, we brought up Harriet Tubman. So I'm going to start with her because it was the bicentennial project that I did with her last year that gave me the idea to do a different kind of series the following year when I realized that hip hop was turning 50. So I had this great, Tubman 200. So, I was able to at least, gather different scholars and artists to actually talk about the meaning of Harriet Tubman for our nation on the occasion of her bicentennial birthday in 2022. And so that really went well. And I got so much support from Ms. Magazine and the Ms. Magazine editors. So I have to shout out to them for actually being willing to support my vision. And so being able to come back the following year with an idea for doing something on women in hip hop is what really shaped that. And there are some interesting, parallels. I think it's interesting when I moderated that special hip hop panel at the National Women's Studies Association conference last month? Yeah, it was just last month. And there were people, people who participated in a Harriet Tubman tour, a local tour that I guided. And when they attended the plenary, they noticed when we talked about Moni Love and Queen Latifah's Ladies First, that the video opened with Harriet Tubman.
I know, amazing.
Yeah. And for some people who didn't grow up with that particular music or even those particular artists, this was like a kind of spotlight or light bulb moment where they realized that, our music, our culture has been able to really shine the light on our own histories. And so I think that was important. So it was not hard for me to go from Harriet Tubman to hip hop, honestly.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yes, absolutely. Because it is a legacy of Black women's resistance and Black women supporting our communities. That's what Harriet Tubman did, leading the community and always putting us first in terms of Black people, whether it's Black women, children, and men. We've always felt the responsibility of our community and building our community. And that's something that I thought was integral to how women also were able to shape something like hip hop culture, even though it is so male dominated. And especially, again, when we talk about how media frames certain stories and narratives, just like they frame the idea that feminism is something only for white women, hip hop has also been framed as something that's only for Black men.
Exactly.
And Black women have always had to fight to show that, hey, we've been in this too.
No doubt. I mean, I remember back in the day, just the original matriarchs, and I always bring them up because people forget. They always think about, the founding fathers of hip hop, and they remembered them, but they don't, remember that there were women right out there too, at the same time back in the day. So I love that. I love that you pulled that history into it, and also the article really covered the struggles that women have within, the industry.
Yes. I thought that was really important. I mean, what I liked about our interview, Dee, because I liked how you reminded me that, even the founding of hip hop, we were there in terms of the women. When you mentioned DJ Kool Herc and his sister Cindy
Campbell,
who sent out the invitations. So we created the space.
Right. He was like the first promoter, basically.
Absolutely. We created the first. So we're the first promoters, and quite literally with Sylvia Robinson, the first producers in terms of getting the music out there commercially.
Record label.
Yes,
she had her own label where she had and actually, fun fact, I lived in Teaneck, New Jersey, which was close to Inglewood, which is where I think the offices were of Sugar Hill, and I would try to get up there, and I actually got some free records from there. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Sylvia is like someone else that we don't talk about enough. You hear about the other major labels in hip hop, but they never mention, her being a woman that, Black owned too, So that's pretty amazing. I love that you put all that in there. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about the conference that we did and the panel and how you put that together.
Okay.
Right on the Black Star Network. We'll be back.
You heard why we're marching, and it's really a launch. It's not even a march. We're launching a 42-week campaign. March the 2nd at 10 o'clock in Raleigh and 33 other state capitals and the District of Columbia. This is a historic move to mobilize the most powerful untapped block of voters in this country, poor and low wealth voters, who make up 87 million votes. And it's never been tried before. Never been tried before in history. At the same time, same message, same focus. And when that power turns loose, they will not be able to figure out the political calculus. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to shake things up. I'm ready to get up out of the valley. I'm ready for God to put his spirit on us. I'm ready to be used to change this nation. And what we're saying is, can't we come together? Can't we come together around an agenda? You ain't got to like everything about Reverend Barber. You don't have to like everything about Sangria. You don't have to like everything about Long Choir. But can we come together and say, it's time to end poverty as the fourth leading cause of death? It's time to have $15 and a living wage indexed with inflation. So every time inflation goes up, the minimum wage goes up. It's time to have health care for all. It's time to fully fund public education. Can't we come together? It's time to protect women's right to women's health. It's time to have affordable housing for everybody. It's time to stop the proliferation of guns. Ain't no way folk ought to be able to have more guns than they have food, more guns than they have meat on their table. That makes no sense. Isn't it time for division to be ended and love to take over? Can't we organize around that? Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I don't need to like everything about you, but can't we organize for power? Can't we stand for justice? Can't we love everybody for just a little while? Can't we come up out of the valley? Can these bones live?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, you're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
A lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All the momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and my special guest, Professor Janelle Hobson. We are getting into the 50th anniversary of hip hop and, the contributions from women. Let me bring my guest back in here. Professor, good to see you again. Over the break, right before the break, actually, we were talking about the National Women's Study Association. And that was a conference that you invited me to for your panel, which was on women in hip hop. How did you get involved with the conference, the National Women's Study Association?
I was invited to participate in programming.
Okay.
Then President Kay Whitehead, who was president for the past 3 years, and she basically wrote me in. I said yes. And I proposed a panel on hip hop because of the 50th anniversary. And also because I was working on the series, I thought, hey, why not extend this conversation beyond just Ms.
When you said the series, you're talking about Ms. Magazine?
Yeah, the Ms. Magazine series.
Which also turns 50.
Yes.
I know. That's such an awesome thing that you did to combine those two, the 50th anniversary with Ms. Magazine and hip hop. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also to raise awareness, because there were quite a number of people who were regular readers of Ms. Magazine who were not as familiar with hip hop. Again, because the prevalent idea is that hip hop is a Black male only genre. So they didn't pay as much attention. So this series actually really helped to highlight who the women pioneers were, who the women rappers are, and even in terms of how we see more and more women hip hop artists who almost seem to be dominating, at least in terms of mainstream music right now.
Right. They are dominating for sure. And now I'm going to go into, because you do gender studies and sexuality, and you just hit a point there that I have to bring up. About how women are perceived now in hip hop, with them, having agency, and they're looked at as it's a negative against us owning our own sexuality. It's too nasty. It's too this, that, and the other thing. But when men were on the mic doing it, it was perfectly fine. And that's because they were controlling the narrative. But now that women want to take the control back, there seems to be so much backlash and pushback, but not just within the industry itself, but publicly too, from the different generations that, different people I've had on. They said, well, it's not, they don't approve of it. They think it's too much. And then at the same time, I feel that we should be free to express ourselves and own our sexuality. So where do you see in that? I know it's like, I have the perfect person to ask that question to, so please.
Yes. Well, so I think issues of agency, I think we have to talk about, not just in terms of personal choices, but also within like systems. Who benefits from this, right?
Right.
So on the one hand, yes, it's great to see, someone, let's take Meg Thee Stallion, for example, seeing her own her sexuality, being as, sexual as she wants to be. There is something that's really refreshing and appealing about that. And especially when she herself is very cognizant of the ways in which she has been criticized for being too sexual, or being hypersexual, right? But then take, for example, that music video she did where she's calling out conservative men and conservative white men in particular, and then turning the gaze around in terms of they're criticizing you, but they still desire you. And so there's a whole hypocrisy that she is definitely calling out in her video. And yet there were behind the scenes images that were showing her male director, who has the camera right up,
yes,
of her background dancers. And it's like, well, okay, wait a minute. So your narrative is great, but then when I see the cameraman and the way in which he's framing your bodies for the full objectification of what your body is, there's a system that's in place that creates ways that we consume women's bodies and Black women's bodies in particular. So we can't just talk about sexual agency without also talking about how do these images also perpetuate certain systems of power that are already in place.
And stereotypes too, like you were saying.
Absolutely. And this is not a new conversation, obviously. Right. Just think about when hip hop became controversial, it was through Black women's bodies. Think of 2 Live Crew being sued and having to fight all the way to the Supreme Court around issues of obscenity. And what was obscene about the music was the way our bodies were talked about in the lyrics, the way our bodies were framed in videos and in the live shows and that sort of thing.
Right. So do you feel that that's a negative towards hip hop and towards women in hip hop, or do you feel that it's a part of society? It's a part of life.
Oh, it's a part of society. I think so obviously there's sexuality in music across the board.
Right.
And that's hip hop.
But they always zero in on hip hop though. Like hip hop's the only one. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah. Hip hop gets, and I think hip hop, they zoom in on hip hop because there's a way in which we tend to be very
blunt.
Yes, blunt. That's it. We're blunt. We don't skirt around. We don't
sugarcoat it. We come right out and say it. Right. And we think of clever ways to say it in different ways.
Absolutely. And on the one hand, if we recognize that, well, the music is always there in terms of pleasure, whether we're talking about parties and concerts where people do get together in terms of romantic relationships and what have you, or even hookups or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it is the oversaturation of the same kinds of images.
Right.
Something that I thought was interesting during our hip hop panel at NWSA, where the rapper Moni Love talked about there was more variety when she started out as a hip hop artist.
Right.
And that is something I would be concerned about. It's like, okay, we have more women, but are they all being forced to fit into the same hypersexual cookie cutter image?
Right. Exactly. I've been talking about that for years about, so I love that Moni brought that up about the balance, you know. She framed it perfectly when saying like, everybody's shooting for the same basket because that's where the attention is right now. That's where the money is. So it pretty much is everyone doing the same thing, but there's so many other different voices out there that are not getting heard. And I don't know. It's just something that bothers me a lot too. I don't understand why that balance is not there. Like we're not hearing the other women bringing up, different, skill sets and topics, you know what I mean? Music wise, but we're only getting the same thing. Same with the men though, for the longest we were getting just, violence on top of violence on top of violence.
Yeah, those are the things that gets attention, right? They're the extremes. And so we tend to focus on the extremes. So those who are doing something more politically conscious don't get the same attention.
So then to the media, right?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the systems you were talking about.
Yes.
How do we break that cycle?
That's a good question. I think the more we talk about it and the more conscious we are, the more we can take note of, okay, so we're getting the same images over and over and over. Right. And I think those who are able to break out of the mold are able to advance us. So take someone who I guess we could call hip hop adjacent, right? So take a pop star like Beyonce. I think that on the one hand, there was that moment when she had her self-titled album that she dropped as a surprise.
Right.
And she really embraced her sexuality full on after that. Really, she's showing that she's becoming more and more independent. But I think it was her Lemonade that really opened up ways in which you can do something so vastly different and have everybody talking. And of course, we might have all just be talking because it's Beyonce and not the fact that it was a great piece of art.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. It is a great piece of art.
Yeah, absolutely. And you realize that she could have done that whole album about, surviving a cheating partner, which is what it is, right? She could have done that in a very straightforward narrative, typical music video, right? But she doesn't do that. She actually was able to venture into more artistic expressions, to delve into African spirituality, to revisit, the plantation history of Louisiana through the sites that she includes in the visuals. And all of a sudden you're thinking a little bit more deeply than this is more than just about my cheating partner.
Right. It was beautiful visually, just artistically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And you'd love to see more artists who are able to do that, not just people who who is at the level of a Beyonce who can, put out her own stuff.
Right. But that, that artistic freedom you don't get until you get to that level, really.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, you start off that way,
yeah.
And then when you get caught in the system, in the machine, then it takes a moment to break free again.
Yes.
And be an artist on that freedom. But I want to talk more about, you said other artistic endeavors. I want to talk about your writing. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back right here on The Frequency.
Check this out. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are investing a record $7 billion into HBCUs. Billions for campus improvements, grants, and debt relief. Billions more for HBCUs. Endless possibilities for us.
Back right here on The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and my guest, Professor Janelle Hobson. Let's bring you back in. We left off about creative endeavors, and one of the things I didn't know, I knew you were writing, of course, and you were thinking about journalism, but you actually have several books out. Are these self-published?
No, these are not. These are actually more academic books that I wrote. Yes, and
these titles, I don't know. These titles are really, they're academic. Let's get into it.
They're works of nonfiction. The first book that I wrote, Venus in the Dark, Blackness and Beauty in Popular Culture, that was based on my dissertation back in the day. So that was one. And then my second book, Body as Evidence, Mediating Race, Globalizing Gender. That's also a continuation of the same issues, but looking at it from a global perspective. And then my most recent book was When God Lost Her Tongue.
I love that title.
Thank you. That one explores what the Black feminist imagination means when we encounter histories. Yeah. So my next book project, I'm hoping, is I'm actually going to delve more into Harriet Tubman as a biography, even though I'm very, I find that daunting to think about writing a whole biography. So I'm thinking it's either a biography or it's going to be about how she is represented in the culture.
Okay, that's a dope idea. I mean, we don't have enough. I don't think we have enough on Harriet. We don't celebrate her enough either, but that goes back to what we were talking about with women. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I agree. We have one movie? I mean, when you consider all the amazing things she's done,
and it's always the same story they tell it. There's so much more to her that I've learned over the years getting, as I get, like I learned something new about her all the time. And I would love to have all that history, in one place, and to learn some new things about, because I'm sure there's stories that we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it hard to do that on a historical figure like that, to the research?
What's the question again? I'm sorry.
Is it hard to write on a historical figure like that, in particular with the research?
I would say it would be hard. So right now I'm getting started in terms of doing research. So I'll be able to say more once I dig into like archives and other kinds of historical data. So it's not so much about hard as it is about how do you put the narrative together? How do you write the story? And what is the story that you want to tell? Because once you have the research done, then it's about how do you interpret that research? And then how do you make that something that can be a compelling story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And in all of your books, really, I mean, of course, they focus on women, which I love, because I think we need these stories told just to help us as women deal with, I think once somebody tells their story, it helps another person heal. You know what I mean? They don't feel so much alone.
Yes.
And this is something we were discussing also when you wanted to talk about the Survivors Act, the Adult Survivors Act.
Yes. That is amazing. And I think it's equally amazing that someone like, for example, Drew Dixon, who was also included in my series and who actually was the one who recommended you, Dee, to include in my lineup.
Thank you, Drew. She's amazing. She's amazing. She's always looking out for other women, you know what I mean? Like she really, really practices what she preaches. And I love and admire that about her.
Absolutely. I remember she came to my attention when I did a review and an interview for the HBO Max documentary On the Record, in which she's featured. She's one of the main features among a number of survivors who came out in terms of surviving sexual harassment and assault, by Simmons. And so that was already not only an interesting story in terms of, yes, there is Me Too, there's a Me Too moment in terms of the music industry, but also just learning about her own background as somebody who's an executive working at Def Jam and Arista, and realizing that she was behind so many amazing hits like
I know
Method Man and Mary J. Blige, You're All I Need to Get By,
and it still blows my mind how much work she's put out and how much you think in terms of what we lost because of that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Think about how old was she? She was like early 20s when she was
she was a baby, you know what I mean? But most of the women, when you look back on the situations that happened within the industry, most of the women were young. Like I believe was it Joan Morgan that said that no one has left unscathed in the music industry. Like there's a story for every woman within the industry. And I'm sure there are for men too, but they have a different take on it. They suppress it. They don't speak on it. A lot of women too have not stepped up to speak on it. But once you see someone speak up, it does encourage you to step forward. And
I think that's what happened. That seems like it's happening. I don't know, because many people are like, oh, we're now going to have our Me Too reckoning. It's like, we'll see.
Yeah. Especially because, they say, the reckoning happening in hip hop, but I mean, it's really the whole music industry.
Yes.
It's really, just like how the things went down with Weinstein in Hollywood, it definitely needs to be a whole reckoning in the music industry, because it's not just hip hop.
No.
You know what I mean? But there are a lot of situations within hip hop in particular that have happened, negative, including, my situation with the incident with Dr. Dre and being physically assaulted.
Yeah.
And honestly more. But I'm not gonna speak on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what is so important is how do we, which I think this is what Me Too allowed, right? It allowed people to actually have space to say, this happened to me too.
And
right?
we need to bring up Tarana Burke because
yes,
she is the one that created that.
Yes, exactly.
We're not going to have any more erasures for women and Black women in particular. So please continue. I'm sorry.
Oh yes, absolutely. And thanks for bringing up Tarana Burke because her work was so important, and especially when she was recognized and honored for that and doing that work way before Twitter was even invented.
Exactly.
Yeah. Way before Me Too was a hashtag, there was Tarana Burke doing the Me Too movement, and I think
these are things that you guys discuss in your women's studies.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we talk about gender and power. So you have to talk about issues of violence because it does come up. And I think what is useful with a term like Me Too, what it does, it allows others to recognize, okay, so I'm not alone. Me too, right? So that's the most important thing. And therefore, if you had a certain experience, it's like, okay, so it wasn't in my head. This was definitely something. And the more you talk, I mean, that's really what Me Too is consciousness raising, really, because that's what feminism was doing in terms of the feminist movement. Being able to talk out loud about, I'm experiencing certain things. It could be because of my gender, it could be because of my race, but once you start sharing, then you can actually say, okay, yes, it is based on my gender, it's based on my race. And that's how you start creating consciousness around issues. And that's when, once you have a community that can talk openly about the issues, then you can start to theorize about the issues. And then from there, you could start building political movement in terms of, once you've recognized the Me Too, then it's like, how do we move forward now? How do we,
that was going to be my question. Like, how do we move forward now after recognizing that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something that we should all be having this conversation, not just those in the music industry or in Hollywood, but in academia. I mean, if you look across the board, so many people have a Me Too experience.
I think about the military in particular, a lot of women in the military experience and suffer in silence.
Yes, exactly. And I think those in power rely on your silence because you're usually too ashamed they know that you're too ashamed to come forward to say, I've been victimized in this way. So let me keep it to myself because who's going to believe me?
Wow.
Yes. So when you have somebody, especially someone with a lot of power, whether we're talking about financial power, cultural power, social power, that becomes much harder. We're talking about, the general idea of rape culture, which is not a culture where, rape is permissible so much as it is a culture where rape is normalized. There's
normalized and accepted.
Yes, and accepted. Yes. And we are talking about a culture where, a 6-year-old girl who has been molested would be looked upon as if she was fast, for example. But a grown man in his 50s, somehow, he couldn't help himself.
That's sick.
I mean, that's the culture that we're dealing with.
That is the culture.
Was fast. Grown man didn't know what he was doing.
Right. Yeah. Oh man,
and that's what we're dealing with. So if we are already in a culture that normalizes that, of course it's hard to come forward with your own experience, which is why Me Too is empowering, because now you realize, oh, it wasn't just me.
Exactly. I still don't like, though, the backlash that, especially Black women and girls get not being believed, we're saying women, but when it comes to Black women and girls, they're not believed.
No, they're not believed because, for such a long time in this country, in the history around slavery and Jim Crow segregation, our bodies were constructed as unrapeable.
Unrapeable because we were property.
Yes, exactly. That we were property. And of course, in order to, and it's not even just a property, we were reproducing property. Okay.
Right. We were product. We were product.
Yeah. So it benefited the system of chattel slavery to rape their property, because then you can reproduce that property with more enslaved offspring coming out of that. And it doesn't matter who did the sexual assault. Right. It was going to be profitable. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with. And then after slavery, when Black people were reclaiming their lives and freedom and advancing themselves, people always ignore that moment, which is why I'm enjoying The Gilded Age right now on HBO. Yes. Because it's actually looking at that generation. They really advanced themselves. No wonder there was that backlash in terms of white supremacy. They had to crack down because just one generation after slavery, Black people rose up, learned to read and write, were entering into Congress, entering into the professions. And that completely dispelled all of the stereotypes that we were these beasts of burden, these brute savages.
Right. Not smart.
Yes, not smart. We're just, only focused on our bestial urges, which is where hypersexuality, the myth of hypersexuality comes from, whether it's the Black man who's raping white women uncontrollably or Black women who are so lascivious that you don't need to rape them. That's what comes out of that particular moment. So Jim Crow segregation, if you ever think about the case of Reese Taylor, for example, I think she's known, and her story was recorded in Danielle McGuire's book, At the Dark End of the Street. And Oprah Winfrey talked about her in her lifetime acceptance speech during the Me Too moment at the Golden Globes. And I think her story is a reminder that during Jim Crow, that rape and sexual violence was part of terrorism, the terrorism that was being used to keep the racial apartheid in place.
Right. Man, the things that women go through in this country. I mean, this is why we need the gender studies.
Yeah, absolutely. And to know that history and to not be surprised by it, and to think about these are the ways that we've been oppressed. These are the ways that we've been able to change and resist that. And these are the ways that we can move forward.
Right.
Because that, so that's what I find amazing is, like, despite all of those awful atrocities, we still were able to advance. We survived, and now we're thriving, and let's try to keep that going, because the backlash is still there. We definitely see there's more violence. There's definitely rape. Rape has not gone away.
Yeah.
And rape specifically is a tool of power and control, not desire, because that's another myth that is always perpetuated, that this is about, I couldn't control myself. I just had all this desire for whoever. Yeah. It's like, no, you had power. And so
I think it needs to be taught more in school, especially, the younger generations. I mean, they're debating now and just teaching basic history, that's being suppressed, and books are being banned. And, we really need to teach this and, try to break some of this cycle.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to know what's going on in the future for you. What's next? Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no! punch.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, you're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us.
We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to PO Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Back right here on The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and my guest, Professor Janelle Hobson. Janelle, that last segment right there where we were talking, right before the break, everything you were saying was hitting home. I mean, I'm so glad I had you on because you really broke down some facts that needed to be heard, you know what I mean, as far as rape culture and the residual effects of slavery. Mm-hmm. So I want to say, first off, thank you, because that needed to be said and you presented it perfectly. Man, this must be what it's like to be in your class. That's how I feel. I feel smart. I feel smart already. You're like, oh, professor, I'm learning some stuff, taking notes. You know what I mean? I love it. What's next?
Thank you for saying that.
I meant every word. Say it again.
I hope my students feel the same way.
I bet they do. They have to. I mean, who can help it?
Okay.
What's next for you? What's on the agenda?
Yeah, so as I mentioned already, I'm going to be doing some research and writing a new book project on Harriet Tubman. I also have some other smaller articles that I'm working on in terms of Black feminism and Afrofuturism. I'm really thinking more, how we are engaging the future, not just the history.
Right.
I'm interested in the history, but I'm also interested in how we're engaging the future as well. I have a number of different things that I'm looking at. I'm also have a third edition that's also coming out of my first book, Venus in the Dark.
Oh, okay.
So that's a chance to revisit and to add another chapter in terms of updating that book, which looks at the legacy of the Hottentot Venus in various representations of Black women and issues of beauty and sexuality. So that is going to be coming out in 2025. So that will actually be the 20th anniversary of the first book, first edition. So I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah, thanks. So, which is interesting because to me, it means that there's always still something to say about Black women and how our beauty and sexuality is defined in the culture.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You ever think about writing something about, women in hip hop? I mean, you've inspired me on a number of different things right now, but I'm curious.
Oh, I think if I'm able to do a good job with the Harriet Tubman biography,
you will.
Then I actually might want to do a hip hop biography.
All right. Yeah. I love that. That's a great idea.
I don't think enough of our pioneers get enough attention.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope the audience enjoyed this conversation. You've really, given me something. I hope the person that I argued with about, womanism and feminism watches this. I'm going to make sure they watch it It was a male, by the way.
Oh.
So I want him to watch this and get educated with Professor Janelle Hobson. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for including me in this show. I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Okay, you guys, it's been an incredible episode right here on The Frequency. I hope you learned something today. We tried to elevate you a little bit. So check us out next time. We'll be back on the Black Star Network. I'm out.